Hello, beautiful souls. I hope you're doing well. Today, I have again the pleasure and honor to have on my channel my dear friend and galactic sister, Vicky. Vicky, I had the opportunity to exchange with you on this channel a few times. We had a few interviews on different topics. You have brought a lot of tips to people regarding how to resilience and how to deal with PTSD and different kind of, you brought some really interesting information as well as some sharing some of your personal experiences. And today I wish to invite you to come and share a little bit more about you, about your life experiences, but in terms of, your life journey, your experiences as a child and as an adult and what you went through. And I think it also helps a lot people to reconnect with your story, and also it gives them a little bit of hope as well when they're going through struggles themselves. I think it's a beautiful way to give to people the opportunity to reflect on other people's experiences and journeys. You are also living in Florida, and recently you have been through, like many Floridians, a lot of very, very challenging times with the deep state playing the harp and giving people a really, really hard time with weather conditions and things. And you're safe, and your home is safe, and your family's safe. But that's also something you wanted to address today, because the topic of our discussion, or let's say more like this interview, would really be about resilience and how we can, transform the challenges in our lives into life lessons or into opportunities to grow and evolve. So without further ado, thank you for coming, Vicky, and welcome.
Thank you, my dear sister. I appreciate your invitation again. And I just wanted to let everyone know that this is my perspective. Obviously, I will talk a little bit about my, experience with my parents and my siblings, but this is obviously from my point of view as someone that's, gone through a different scenario, and from Catholicism then changing to Buddhism, which I was the only one in the family to do so. So the perspective may be different, and I obviously want to respect that if my relatives or friends see it, they know that this is my perspective, and life always changes, so
Yeah.
thoughts and beliefs change as well. So, but thank you for having me again.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So I'm going to just let you go with the flow, the organically. And if you want to perhaps start a little bit, we'll keep the topic of what happened in Florida for the end. So we invite you to stay till the end to really, really learn more about your experience, but also other people's experience in Florida in the situation that happened. But first, we'll start a little bit chronologically with your childhood and the different challenges or situations you went through, and that brought you an opportunity to grow and evolve. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, my darling. It's interesting because what came to my mind, and it'll tie in with the end, is the word hurricane. In Spanish, well, it actually is a native word from the natives in the South Florida and Caribbean, huracán. That's the name. So it comes actually from the natives. And starting with that, my parents both are from Puerto Rico. And we, from my understanding, we all have the heritage of the Spaniards, the natives, and the Africans. So that what composes, the background of my family.
Beautiful richness and diversity. Yeah.
It is, and I wish I would have, when I was younger, got involved more into it, but it's what it is. But it's beautiful to actually get to know, that part of you, because that is a very important part of your cultural and how you act and your family. So, and how you come together and your beliefs. So that influenced, a lot of us, my siblings and I, as we grew up, because both of our parents were born in Puerto Rico. I'm going to try to fast forward now. They met through correspondence. Now we have online. Well, my parents met through correspondence. It was a
Lovely.
newspaper. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh. So, I was listening to their story way back, and my mom was just 23. My father was a bachelor. He was 40 years old. So he had, it was a age gap there. My father was pretty handsome and a bachelor. So he was like, I need to, get myself going and get married, have a family, because everybody was already kind of telling him "You need to settle down." My mother, on the contrary, she was 23. She wanted to get out of the house. Believe it or not, my grandmother had 14 children, and that was a lot for her. And my mother lost her father at age 6 or 7. So
Wow.
that was a very traumatic thing for her, because she was very, very close to her father. My grandmother was the matriarch, but she had a lot of, I call it Taino, because Taino blood is the native blood. So she was pretty tough, and she had to raise 14 kids. So unfortunately, some of them went to school, some of them didn't. My mom dropped off. She didn't get to graduate. So a lot of them at a very, very early age had to work. They're kids, so they had to help their older brothers, and as well as my dad, and their upbringing was pretty poor. And they were humble. They had food, they had shelter and all that, but they struggled. So
Yeah.
the environment already there was not conducive to being although they may seem tight family, but there was always taboos and things going on in between, and stories that you hear through relatives and the town. When the town is small, everybody knows everybody,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
a lot
Chisme.
of talk. Chisme, exactly. The interesting thing that, and I hope to learn more about my family background, is from my grandfather's side, my mom's father. His mother was a midwife.
Mm.
So she would take her as a little girl with her botiquín, which was what we call it. It's a little bag with all her stuff. She was the town's midwife. So she would go and take my mother. I have goosebumps. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But she would take my mother to all these, women that were giving birth, in their house, and it was funny because when I hear my mother's relatives, her brothers and sisters' name, I'm like, how did you get all these names?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're weird names. And she would say, well, they would look at the calendar. It was a Catholic
Yeah.
calendar, and they would pick, okay, Josefina. you know, that was the day that Saint Josefina, whatever, was,
Mm-hmm.
so everybody had these. Concepcion was another name, and it's
Yes.
conception. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these names, I guess when you have so many kids, you just like pick, you
Yeah.
know, somewhat randomly. But that part was very interesting. Now, moving fast forward, obviously, they both had a very harsh life, and I won't get into details. But when they met, obviously they had both different reasons for coming together. It wasn't like, I want to find love. It didn't seem like that was the romantic type of union, that it was, I have to settle. I need to get out of the house.
Yeah.
Let's get
Supporting each
together.
other in those desires
Yeah,
too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. But moving forward, my father came, met her. It was a quick ceremony, and he took her to New York. So it was 19, I think 67 or so, that they went to New York. His family was there. He had a few, like 5 siblings. And my grandmother was alive from that side at that moment. And unfortunately, she died like a month before I was born.
Mm.
So, so my mother, unfortunately, wasn't too happy to go to, even though she wanted to leave the house, going to New York was actually not,
It's a big, it's a big leap, a big
yeah,
step.
she doesn't know English. That's her first time leaving the Puerto Rico, and the whole dynamics was totally different. So it wasn't like she went from bad to good. It was like from bad to probably worse
Okay.
scenario. So so when I was conceived, and my mother was going through a lot. So, and we talked about this in a lot of your interview, and I think Milena as well, that, when your parents and go through things, and you're pregnant, children can perceive a lot of the traumas and the dramas
You
that
feel it.
we're going through, they're going through.
Yeah.
So my mother accounts that when I was born, my father wasn't there. It was like, I think it was 10 o'clock at night or so. So the police had to pick her up. So it was like this, this whole drama thing of going to the hospital with the police and getting me to the hospital and all that stuff. But
It wasn't a cozy kind of birth. It was a little bit
like,
stressful.
oh my gosh, we're gonna go to the hospital now. She broke water. It was a pretty, intense situation. But it is what it is. It's like, now looking back and as an adult, and this is where compassion comes, and that's why I was grateful to get into instead of the philosophy, the teachings of Catholicism, which did not serve me. If Buddhism gave me a better perspective and foundation to understand what my father and my mother went through and have compassion, because most of the time, and I see it every day, we are blaming the people. It's my father's fault. It's my mother's fault. It's my grandmother's fault. And then eventually you started to understand that these people were going through so much during that time. And, they made a decision to have children. I didn't, I wouldn't have made that decision. But they had three of us. We had one after the other with three girls. And unfortunately, we did lose one baby, and that was another traumatic experience. My mother had went through the 9 months, and I was getting attached. I was 7 or 8, so I was waiting for that birth as well. But before I get to that, living as a child with my siblings and my parents, we had our ups and downs. And a lot of had to do that, going back. My parents, like I said, didn't get married for probably the right reasons. So it was a lot of confrontation, a lot of disagreements, and not seeing eye to eye. And that was something that, unfortunately, it was brought up. It wasn't like, you guys go to the room and, we'll have an argument over here. It was like the argument started, and
you were witnesses of.
We were there. Yeah, so that, it's nerve-wracking to have children witness their disputes, so. But the good thing, I have to always bring up good things. My dad used to love going to travel. So he always took us either to New York, to Coney Island, to the movies. In that sense, he was good at doing these things, So that would probably ease a little bit the
tension,
the drama at home. But eventually, the other thing is my father was in the military, so he got honorably discharged. So there was something there as well. And he wasn't stable. He every year for the first 10 years of my life and my sister's, we moved every year. I mean, he would pack. We would go to another home, to another, to Florida or to New York or Puerto Rico. So we couldn't have a stability somewhere we can say, we can have friends, we can have relationships, we can have family. It was a lot of goodbyes, and it was very hard, to pack up and go again and again and again. And eventually, obviously, that ended, when I was 10 or 11. And my sister were ready, and I was like, Mom, we can't be with this dynamic, you need to let Dad go. And I mean, I'm cutting in between, but that was one of the hardest decisions to make, to know as a child that your parents, cannot be together, and that you have to encourage your parent to leave, because
things are
at that point we couldn't even sleep, we were walking on eggshells. And and then my dad, bless his soul, he's not with us anymore, but he wanted to take us away. So there was this,
You're
my father, yeah.
pulled. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was trying to get custody of us. My mom was, but it's I'm saying this and I don't want to feel like we're victims. There's a deeper reason why we were born in this family, you know, and I feel that it's part of our growth. It's part of our understanding of the dynamics of how relationships work, how love works, how
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness works, compassion, how everything is so intertwined, that you start to understand that there's a journey that's going on. So it makes it much easier, even though at the beginning it's very frustrating. It's very painful,
Yeah.
because all as a child you want to have is the support
Mm-hmm.
of your parents, not the other way around, So
You
so
become a
that
little bit the parent of the parent.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. And I was the eldest, so I felt like I automatically took charge, and it wasn't. And I love my sister to death, but they didn't like it because I just felt out of fight or flight, I guess. I felt like I needed to protect them. And
Yeah.
sometimes it came off as you're on my nerves, get out of the way, stop it, you're not my mother, And
Being overprotective a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, looking back, I can see that I was overprotective and decisions that you had to become some sort of like an adult to make certain decisions,
Yeah.
to guide your parent because your parent's so, all wrapped up in something that they cannot see,
Yeah.
and you're outside of it and you're seeing this thing going on a train wreck. But getting back to that, eventually, like I said, now looking back, I if it wasn't for that, then the person that I am today wouldn't be the person that I am today.
Of course.
So um, there's always obviously more detail to it because eventually, we had to live with my mother, and my father had to go elsewhere. And it was hard to get visitations and, I'm starting college and and we were still living in Puerto Rico. I can tell at that time my father's starting to become ill. I was like 17 or 18. And I started to see signs. I didn't know then, but I started to see signs of Alzheimer's, And when my cousin came by from Miami and she says, you should guys come to Miami Beach and live over there. And I wanted to finish my bachelor, but my mother kept pushing me and I just went ahead. And when we got to Miami, then my father started to show more signs of the disease. And at that point, I was 20, 21. I had no clue what that was. And I had no clue what another journey was going to be
And what a
involved in.
journey to come. Yeah. Especially in those years,
Yeah,
which are, you're beginning your life as an adult. Normally it's a place where
yeah.
you open your wings and you fly and then woof, nope.
No, I had my wings. I was ready. I was ready to fly.
Mhm.
But I didn't question it. Yes, yes, darling.
I just
Yeah.
want to stop you a second because there's an element you haven't talked about, but which I think is really important that you've talked
Sure.
to me
Yeah.
about is that as a child, even though you were going through some challenges, you were a very joyful,
Yeah.
dancing,
Mhm.
singing child. So there was
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
aspect of you, your soul knew or was connected, that part of your soul that is filled with creativity, with joy, with what we could call high vibes, basically. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that all of this was happening around you, but there was this part of you still alive that was still, but I can imagine with,
Yes.
the beginning of adulthood, when all of this took place, it was probably
Mhm.
difficult for you to keep up those high vibes and trying to
Yeah.
keep the head above the water. So I just wanted to put
Yeah.
that contrast there because you've mentioned that in the past, and I thought it was an interesting and important element. But sorry,
No,
I didn't
thank
want to cut
you.
you there.
No, no, no. I think it's very important. Thank you for bringing that up because it is an important part of who I am, and what eventually happens is that I kind of push that away a little bit,
To
because
survive. Mhm.
yeah, because when I see the pictures, and one day you probably see, I was just a silly girl, I wanted to make everybody happy. The music was on, and we all danced and we all sang, and
Mhm.
that's how the family really was, the Puerto Rican family. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, there is a layer of that suffering that you know it eventually comes forth and dims that
Mhm.
beautiful culture, and that we all have. But I'm glad you did bring that up, because yes, I was always involved in either music or dance, and you can, eventually you can see, if when you know me, you can see it's been prevalent through the years. But at certain moments I had to, like I said, put it on the side
Yeah.
and deal with the serious stuff that life was bringing. But
Throwing at
the
you.
other, what was that?
That life was throwing at you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, it's like here you are, you're dancing salsa or whatever, and then an argument comes up. That's how it was. It's like
Mhm.
everybody's having, we're having a birthday party, and all of a sudden, what's going on? I hear, my parents screaming, and I'm like, we're just having a birthday party.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But one thing I want to make sure too that I bring up is that I realized how protected we were, because I think I mentioned it in earlier videos that you've had me with other roundtables, is this protection. And I want to, hopefully I don't get too emotional, but
It's okay if you
but
do. It's part of the process.
yeah. But I think when I mentioned there were certain light beings that came into my house, and I was around 7 or 8, and my sisters witnessed it. I was sleeping, and I think they came because I realized that we were probably going through a very rough
Mhm.
situation, and they sensed, the
The
a
need
lot
for
of fear
support.
and
Yeah.
trauma.
Mhm.
So I now I realize probably they came to check, because
Mhm.
they were right around us, mainly, like my sisters mentioned, they were around my bed, and they were just light beings. One of them mentioned they had wings, and it was Mother Mary. My other sister says they were just human forms with light. So I'm still to this day trying to understand and figure it out. But anytime I think about everything we went through, I feel that they've always been there, because there was many situations where I could have cracked, I could have died, you know, and my
Absolutely.
sisters as well, but it didn't happen, you know. So I just threw that in there, to
We're
I
never
guess,
alone. We're never alone.
no, we're never alone. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing to have learned about, because I totally had forgotten about it for years.
And the corroboration by your siblings, by your sister is
Yeah,
interesting because, like you say, they're not necessarily into all that stuff, that galactic stuff we're interested in.
no,
So the fact that they were actually corroborating this is actually really interesting because it's not just you wishful thinking
no,
there. It's
no.
and you
So,
mentioned those light
mhm,
beings, and it's interesting because when beings are like of high frequency, they always appear to us as just light beings, but I mean they could have been like humanoids but just like
yeah,
in a higher
yeah, they had human
frequency.
shape. Yeah,
Exactly. So I
yeah,
mean, it's for you to discover exactly who that
yeah.
beautiful upstairs family is, but
Absolutely, absolutely. There was definitely um, some sort of benevolence there, and
yeah,
and you
love.
know and protection. And I think now that I think about it, my mother always used to tell me about certain things that she would witness, like paranormal things. So, and at first I didn't, believe her, because I was so young, and but she would tell me she would see certain things. So I think it goes back through, I think maybe my maternal grandmother.
Capacity
But
to see certain things and perceive.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. So moving forward, unfortunately, my father at that time was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So, and my parents were already divorced. So I didn't question it. I was the oldest. It's just he's my father. So I just basically had to go through all the navigation of what to do next, and not to go into too many details, but basically I had to become his uh, caregiver slash legal guardian. I had to legalize control over his assets or whatever, and take care of that. Thank goodness he was a veteran, so I was able to get some benefits for him because I still had to work full time. So it was hard for me to try to take care of his affairs and visit him with my sister, and make sure he was okay and he wasn't going to burn the apartment or anything like
Yeah,
that.
it's such an engagement of energy with
Yeah,
someone who loses their kind of
yeah.
autonomy in that way.
Yeah, and that's another story because obviously, as you know me, I'm very into health and how we can heal and how we've been unfortunately misled to how our capacity to heal is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so at that point, I had to put him in a place because he had his own apartment. Sorry, my cat's trying to get my attention
All
again.
right.
Um,
Welcome him if he comes.
yeah. So my dad, interesting enough, my dad was very hard-headed. It was hard to have a relationship with him, but when he became ill with this, his demeanor changed. There was this vulnerability that made him change his way of being and letting me in more.
It's
So I
beautiful.
was able to actually have a better relationship, believe it or not, with him
Mm.
because he was able to tone down. It was just an interesting aspect to this whole dynamic of how he they come in and out. So he realized that I was the one, me and my other sister were needing to take care of him, but then he would go into his place within that disease. But there was a lot of beautiful moments, and it actually got me more together with him in a different level. Started to understand why he was how he was, to a certain extent. So that created, like, the empathy and the compassion to be able to do it without question, because
Yes.
I wasn't doing it. Obviously at the beginning is frustrating because you're just 2021, you know, and but that go ahead, Manny.
Can I ask you a question? I'm sorry, I don't want
Yeah.
to cut you, but
No, no,
probably
no.
not at the time, because at that time you were just, going through all of this, just trying to survive. But now, today, in your perspective, do you feel like somehow your relationship with your dad was somehow like a soul contract, that there was something you had planned before to experience not only the growing and the challenges, but also something to heal between you two, or I
I
don't
I
know,
think
or
there's something there because both my parents, I mean, my mother lost her father at an early age. My father's father left the family unit and created another family. So, and he died in his 50s, my grandfather. And then then I have my dad, and the relationship was I my mom and my sisters always says, "Well, you're his favorite." And I'm like, I don't understand what that means. I'm just the oldest daughter, and I'm just
you
trying
took
to take
upon
care of.
yourself to care
Yeah,
for him, and yeah.
that's all. So if and he gave me a hard time. Dad was not the easiest guy to get along with. He was very stubborn, and he pushed me around a bit through my you unfortunately, I love my father to death, and like I said, we got together after he got ill, so I was able to kind of that chipped away that wall that he had, being in that tragic disease because it's one of the worst. I mean, one thing is to have pain, but one thing is to lose your capacity to function mentally and still be in a body, you know.
Yes.
And
It's such
yeah,
a psychological trauma
yeah,
and pain. Yeah.
yeah. Now
Mhm.
they get very upset. They get angry because at the beginning, eventually, you know, he toned down. But yeah, my father was very. He didn't physically hit or anything, but he was verbally and tough and rough around the edges. Let's put it that way. So moving forward with that, definitely that has something to do with the male aspect as well with my relationships. So that's that. Looking back again, after my relationship with my dad, I can understand how my relationships went afterwards on that aspect. But and with my mom, they both unfortunately were in survival mode. You know, they were trying to survive. They only knew what they were taught through their parents, and it wasn't the best. You know, so I obviously had to put a certain things aside, in order to um, be sane and to be able to help. I don't get me wrong, I still, I used to live in Miami Beach back then. And the way that I
Oh.
used to
Mhm.
let out a lot of that stuff because I love dancing was to go to the clubs in Miami Beach. I was like, it's Friday night. I'm going out. I'm going to dance, and that would, my sisters and I would go out dancing, and that really would help alleviate a lot of that tension
Of
that was
course.
going on.
You were venting
Yeah.
in that way and energetically as well. Your vibes are getting up.
Oh yeah.
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 Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course, everybody has these sadness and these drama and traumas around, but there's always times when you do things that are happy, because if not, if you don't balance it out to a certain extent, you're just going to be a total mess, you know.
Absolutely. Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I can see myself, and I that was something and it's funny because we would get home and our feet hurt so much that we had to ice them. That's how much dancing we
Wow.
did
Mhm.
back in the day. And my ears were like, because the whole
Yep.
loud music. I think that's why I have some tinnitus, maybe.
Yeah.
But but that was a good time. That for sure, at least
Helped you cope.
yeah, absolutely. And we lived on the beach, so going to the beach was good as well,
Cool.
So
Mhm.
but moving forward, unfortunately, my dad eventually passed away in 2001,
Mhm.
and he was 74.
For
He
how many years did you were you his care?
he got it for 11 years. He
Wow.
was 63. He was very young. I think he had an injury when he was training in Korea. I think he was in Germany training with a tank, and he got hit in the head. So I feel that head trauma was possibly linked to his early stage of having Alzheimer's and many other factors. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always multifactorial, I imagine. But then
Yeah.
for 10 years of your 20s, basically, I mean, your whole 20s
Yeah.
went into a place of caring, which,
Yeah. It
yeah,
was, it was, yeah. I
speaks for
mean,
itself.
yeah, it was challenging because I would have had him at home, but I had my mother and they were divorced. So it was a struggle between, having my mother with me. I cannot bring him into my home. We were living somewhat humbly, so I was very thankful that the VA had benefits that were able to cover
Yeah.
for him to go to a place which I really liked, and it was in Miami Beach, and it didn't look clinical or anything. It looked like an apartment, and I would go once or twice a week, to check on him, and we would talk a few times during the day. We would go to the movies, and I would take him out and with my sister, and so we eventually we were able to eventually manage, because I had to work. There was no other option. I had to pay my bills. So uh, um, sadly, he passed away on Father's Day on July 17, I think it was Father's Day in 2001. So it was, at first I was very upset because it was Father's Day. So I'm like, how can you do this? But then I turned it around and I said it was the best day actually, that he could have,
It was kind
because
of
we had a good
released from
day.
this envelope, this physical envelope
Yeah.
avatar that
Yeah.
is keeping
And
him.
he was, we had a beautiful Father's Day. I knew something was off, and then I dropped him off after Father's Day. We took him back to his place. I took him back, and then I got a call immediately that he wasn't breathing, and so I went, and it was my first kind of like very intense experience with death. I mean, I have seen death a few times in my life, but not so close. Being my father. But I was glad that he was in his sleep. He kind of went to sleep.
Yeah,
He gave me his blessings, and I left, and then I came back, and um he was gone, and it was just this interesting way of seeing. I touched him. I know it's crazy, but I wanted to feel him, and you can tell when that life was not in there anymore,
it's a different.
and at that
It's a
yeah.
complete different body, a different field.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
frequency is not there anymore.
No, but his essence was there. I sensed him afterwards, which was because I was so concerned about him. Sorry, let me drink some water. Even though he had passed, I was concerned. I'm like, where is he? Where is he? Okay? Is he cold? I'm thinking, because I'm not reasoning to that he's no longer in his physical body. So as I'm thinking about these things, I feel a presence, and I freak out. And I just close myself up because I wasn't too familiar with that type of,
And it was too recent to kind of deal with that. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, but eventually I sense, even my sister, she said, I can smell him sometimes, I can sense him. She's very, very more intuitive and sensitive to these things, which is another story. But she would tell me, I sensed that today, or and and you know, as a Buddhist now, as a Buddhist, I became a Buddhist actually, like maybe a year or two before he passed, and that gave me such an anchor to be able to deal with it, because with the concept of I might be jumping around a little bit, but with the concept of Catholicism that I was brought up with, that was so fragile and not it just didn't give me any foundation or hope or any. It was just, it is what it is, that that's God's will. But when this happened with him, I had a breakdown, at the end, and because it was so much responsibility, and mentally and emotionally, that I didn't have the tools at that time. And when I did have that breakdown, that's when I started to search and to understand that what I was taught was not helping my family. It didn't help my mother, it didn't help my father, and it wasn't helping me. So at that point, I was like, I have to change this, because if I don't break the cycle, if I'm going to break down and not come back up, with tools and a different outlook, then what there is to live for.
Yeah.
So so I after that breakdown, that I realized that, obviously I didn't have nothing to anchor me into what life was and how the dynamic was. As I started to search, I did find what found me Buddhism, because my friend, a good friend of mine, um, was there at that time. He says, Vicky, I think I found something that can help us understand the dynamics of life and how to move forward. And the philosophy was amazing, and to this day, I know
Yes,
that
thank
it's
you.
considered one of the three major religions, but that's a label that we've given it. But Buddhism itself was a way of life. It wasn't just a a practice or a ritual. It was a way of life. It was a way of thinking, of treating people, of treating the environment,
Yeah.
of creating a foundation that would help you understand how life really works, you
Mhm.
know? It wasn't like, all of a sudden you're born and now you have to go to work, study, go to work, and Buddhism doesn't talk to you about that. It
Mhm.
broadened my perspective about life and how everything is a ebb and flow of cause and effect,
Yeah.
and that whatever we think, say, and do is your environment is a projection of that.
You create
So
your reality
yes,
through, yeah. Mhm.
yeah. So when I was told you are responsible for your reality, I was like, really? Because I was always thinking it was something outside of myself through Catholicism. It's something, bigger than me. I'm a sinner. So I'm this small. So, everything that happens to me is just gonna be, it's just what it is. But when I started to shift my perspective through the Buddhist philosophy of the Lotus Sutra specifically, it just opened my eyes to uh, be able to be more empowered
Yeah.
and to understand that life is not based on coincidence or bad luck. And, it was about the choices that I made with the perspective that I had and beliefs that I would sustain through my life.
Give you
You
back your
know,
sovereignty, basically, and just, yeah.
absolutely.
That's
So, it yeah, that came at the right time because then I was able to understand my father. Obviously, at the beginning, I still was new to it, so I had a different reaction than what I have. But I can tell you, when my father passed, I thought I was going to be mourning for a long time,
Mhm.
but I didn't. And that was one of the things that I learned from Buddhism is that your mourning phase is very short.
Mhm.
So for some people, it can be a year, 2 years, or for me, it was, believe it or not, it was like 2 weeks. And I was even shocked because I'm like, how come I'm not mourning anymore?
Mhm.
And that was one of the questions that I had. But then eventually my dog passed and the same thing happened. Obviously, I was more mourning for his loss, and it was very sad. And but then it was done,
Mhm.
you know. I think of my dog, I think of my father, and my heart is and my mind is fine because I
Mhm.
know with the philosophy of Buddhism that life doesn't cease to exist.
Mhm.
We continue a beautiful um, circle. It's not linear. It's birth, death, and life, and you just keep going. And depending on what your experience is in this lifetime, you will encounter your next one, or until you learn, until you go through this journey of life and through many other lives if necessary in order for you to go back to to Buddhahood, which is enlightenment.
Yeah.
So um so it was interesting because now getting into the galactic community, there was so many interesting points that, from my humble opinion, it resembles what there's spoken about,
Mhm.
especially knowing that Buddhahood is within you. Your journey is to become enlightened, to
Mhm.
become wise,
Mhm.
and to eventually go back um to where we come from, you know. So
Beautiful.
so
Mhm.
it's pretty cool. I mean, and there's so much other stuff, but the actual, if I feel that if it wasn't and I had family members which and friends that criticized me, unfortunately, because here I am, a New Rican, which we call because I was born in New York, but my heart is from the island.
Mhm.
Um, is very Catholic. You're born, when you're Puerto Rican, you're born most of the time Catholic, and that's how you're raised.
Mhm.
You go to church, you do your rosaries. I mean, that's how much, even though behind the scene there was something else, believe it or
Yeah.
not,
Mhm.
it was contradicting.
Yeah.
And, I was butting heads with my mom, but I did it. It was hard because, it was a total 360.
Yeah.
I had to change. I remember the day that I had to let go of the concept of God that was taught to me.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was in Miami Beach in my apartment and I said, oh my gosh, and I was in fear. I was trying to hold on to that idea. And I'm like, I, I have to let go of that concept in order to practice and open up to Buddhism. And I tell you not, Abigaëlle, as soon as I said I let go of that concept, I felt this weight off of
Literally, yeah,
literally.
moving out of your.
It was like I felt this freedom that I was able to say, I let go of that concept of God that was taught to me, you
Mhm.
know, and I'm going to embrace now the concept of Buddhahood, you know, and
That
I
you are
have,
basically a fractal of source. Is that what
yeah,
you would call the, if we transfer or translate this, what you say, the state of Buddhahood, could we say it's a little bit like being conscious that you are a fractal of source or a fractal of that creation
I
energy?
can say that to you. I mean, obviously, when it comes to the concept of saying that it within the Buddhist community, it
Yeah.
doesn't
No, no,
go
of
too
course not.
well. But I humbly can say to a certain extent that, yeah, there's because at the end of the day, we are at different paths in our journey. So to say an example, source is right in the center, right? This fractal, and so everyone is getting to that center in a different road, right? Somebody is probably behind you, you're a little bit forward, but we're aiming for that center, you
Yeah.
know. And as long as your heart and is there, and as long as you're treating others in the best way possible,
Yeah.
I think you're on the road,
Hmm.
you know. I cannot say, at one point, yes, I was like, Buddhism and the Lotus Sutra is the way, the path. But after 2020 and after going through the hurricane, I'm like, everybody has a path, you
Yeah.
know, everybody has a path. In this lifetime, my path was from Catholicism to Buddhism,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm still, I'm not 100% still like I was because of everything that happened before,
Hmm.
2020 and the hurricanes and all that. But I still honor the philosophy. I still honor the practice because it took me out of this place that was not helping me to deal with life
Yeah.
because I didn't know really what the dynamics of life was,
Yeah.
you know. And this practice really showed me
Guided
a
you
path.
towards yourself, basically, towards your center.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Before we, because you talked about the 2020 hurricane, and that's something that's going to
Yeah.
slowly lead us perhaps
Yeah.
towards that topic of the 2024. But before we go there, there's another aspect of your life that I don't know to how much you're ready to, how deep into the subject you're ready to go. So I'm not going to prod you. I'm going to just let you
No, go
say
ahead.
what you feel comfortable talking about. But we had
Hmm.
that conversation, you and me, not only privately, but also online in the interviews regarding relationships, romantic relationships. And you have mentioned earlier that the relationship you had with your dad and this whole nation of caring and, the whole thing had an
Yeah.
impact on your life.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk a little bit about that aspect of your life if you're comfortable with it? Because I think it might touch a
Sure.
lot of people who have also, like you, like me, like
Hmm.
other people,
Yeah.
have not had many
Yep.
relationships in the last few years,
Mhm.
and there is reasons for that. And so maybe you want to
Absolutely.
address that a little bit.
Absolutely. Um, I feel that because of the relationship, I mean, you look at your father as the prime male person in that family, and I wish, and I obviously, I wish I had the relationship that with my father that was open and, but it was a different relationship, it wasn't that of which I would have loved to have,
Mhm.
So, even though we had our ups and downs, and eventually my father, I was able to open up and be more, as well as he was opening up with me during that period where he was ill. That got us closer. I think I was able to close some of a chapter there with him of being able to feel the empathy and compassion of what he went through, and not be resentful, you know,
Yeah.
and forgiving, towards him. So moving fast forward, relationships were very complex for me because obviously I didn't have that concept of what a healthy relationship was. Um, I felt the need of, as I look back, of having a strong male figure, in my life. But at the same time, I didn't want that anchoring and holding me back as
Mhm.
well. So I had a little trouble with balancing that out. So I would get into a relationship, but at the same time, I wanted love, I wanted compassion, I wanted, but at the same time, as if that person was needy, I
Mhm.
couldn't
It's like,
deal with it.
no, big no, no.
I was a big no, and then I felt like I had to walk on eggshells because, and I see it then. I see it that's what happened in my life as a child. And as a young adult, I had to walk on eggshells to make sure that I didn't hurt no one's feelings, you know. So that was something that reoccurred a lot in my relationships because I felt that I needed to do the right thing, that I had to say the right thing, that I have to be the right thing, that I, to make sure that I didn't,
You did
you know,
lead on someone into something that, yeah.
and if I did lead, I would feel horrible
Mhm.
because I felt responsible for their feelings.
Mm.
If you laugh because I think you can
Oh,
understand.
everything you say just resonates so much that I know
Yeah.
exactly what you
And
mean.
I felt this need because I had to be careful with my parents' feelings because they were already hurt, and I had to make sure that I cushioned them to so they don't hurt anymore. Or what. So I
Yeah.
dragged that into my relationships, and then I felt this weight of trying to be careful with their heart and their mind, and neglecting completely how I felt. And then going into another dark night of the soul because obviously I wasn't taking care of my heart, you know. So long story short, I did meet someone that he was like, oh my gosh, this guy is like, because I'm very intellectual in the sense that I
In
have to have
mind.
a conversation with that person. I
Mhm.
cannot just sit there and hold hands and, and look at the stars.
It has to be stimulating intellectually.
Has
You
to
need
be
to be.
stimulating
Mhm.
because it's just who I am, the simulation of information, of thoughts, of many things.
I know what you mean.
So yeah, so I said to myself, it didn't work out, I think, with him because of the timing. I was not ready. Even though I can see him as a potential partner of what I was looking for in my life, I wasn't ready. So I'm like, I had to, I struggle with it because I'm like, my gosh, he's the perfect guy for me right now, but I'm just a mess right now, you know?
And I don't want to
And
hurt him and break his heart.
no, and he was
Mhm.
strong enough to he was just so wise. He says, we need to we need to stop here. And even though I was reluctant because I'm very hard-headed as well, when I'm like this, when I'm determined about something
Yeah.
and I feel that it doesn't make sense, I keep going at it and going, and sometimes you have to surrender, you
Yeah.
know. And and since then I just decided to be on my own because I was not going to follow the pattern of taking a break and then getting back into another relationship. I'm like, I don't think that's for me right now, especially what I've gone through. I needed to understand all that happened, you know,
Take care of
before.
yourself and your own needs, but also it gets very tiring to be taking
Yeah.
care of someone else's feelings. Like when you're always walking on eggshells like that, it tires
Hmm.
you, like it drains
It's
you. And it's
exhausting.
so much relaxful not to have a relationship than live relationships in that way where you're always worrying what the person's going through. And,
Yeah.
it's like it's draining.
It's
So,
very draining, and
yeah.
it shouldn't be that way, but I guess because of the circumstances of how I, you know,
Yeah.
was raised, it's just by proxy, you
Mm.
can't just, you know, um, so I had to accept the fact that maybe it's okay for as long as I can't, wish to be on my own. Maybe that's what I need to do, and that's where I'm at right now. And I'm not gonna count the days or the months or the years. I'm just gonna count on myself to see,
Mm-hmm.
okay, Vicky, what do you think? And at this moment, I'm at peace, to be honest with you. I don't feel lonely. I'm at peace. I I can be very introverted, but I can be very extroverted. I have that both sides, and I can deal with both. And during, especially during these times, now going into 2020 was a huge a change. Not only 2001, and I'm not going to go way back there, but 2020 was a pivotal moment for a lot of us, when it came to really opening our eyes in a different way. Because before it was like your eyes are open, but you're working, you're paying bills, you're going to dinner with your friends. So you're kind of half like, like a little bit over there, but you're mostly trying to live your life. But when
Mm-hmm.
2020 came, it was like everything stopped for 3 months in where we lived, and it was like very eerie because it was very quiet. There was no traffic, and you can started to see who's really where,
Mm-hmm.
and I took a pause because I didn't know obviously what really was going on. I knew something was fishy.
Of course.
And very fishy. And then I that was another pivotal moment because I said, this is not true. This is true. And am I going to stand up for the truth now, or am I going to walk on eggshells and try to
Again.
make people happy again?
Yeah.
And that showed me, I within the practice, even within the practice, things kind of, shook up a little bit. And I was just a little like, wait a second, this is when we're like going full force and we're going to be chanting and praying and coming together. And then everything just kind of, people went like, okay, we got to stay at home. We can't meet. And what do you mean you can't meet? What do you mean we have to do Zoom now? So I was like, what do you mean I can't visit because I was a communicator back then. I was a liaison between the temple in Washington and the members in South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing was, who can I help? Where can I go and chant and be there supportive? No, you can't go. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't go? These people need me more now
Mm-hmm.
than ever. I can't. So that was a roadblock. But at the same time, I said, you know what? I'm going to say what I need to say, and it doesn't matter if it's a Buddhist, you know, practice, and it doesn't matter if it's the priest that
Mm-hmm.
I talked to. But I did. I stood my ground and I spoke to the priest. I said, "This is how I feel," and that was a big moment for me, because for me to verbalize something to an authority, I mean, even though they don't consider themselves like,
Yeah. Yeah.
boss or anything like that, but for me to go from a little girl, trying to be quiet and hold my thoughts and my words and my what I really felt, to saying, okay, this is how I feel. I don't agree with us not seeing the members. I don't believe in what they're putting out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't do that. And I said, I pray, please don't do this. I don't believe in that. I think but that's all I can do. I can only express it. But just by expressing it was so powerful. And then I had to deal with that at work as well. Everybody wanted me to cover myself up, to get that. I mean, I was just trying to get my house. I decided that I wanted to move, but I couldn't until they accepted me at my loan. But I had to have all these criterias, and I have to work at this in my area. It was just, I had so many obstacles that I was like praying that it would go through so I can leave and start new again.
Yeah.
So trying to move forward at work, I it was stressful because, the pressure was on. It was corporate America. I had to comply. So I was just buying time so I can get my loan and I can get approval so I can buy it and leave with my family, with my mother and my sisters, because I was living on my own. But then dealing with work and saying, they're emailing me, up to date with your, and I would ignore them, and everybody was getting this,
Mm.
and I was like the black sheep again in
It's
this
been such a rough,
environment.
such a difficult period where we were just at odds with everyone. We felt so rejected, and it was so hard,
Yeah.
so hurtful, so difficult.
And you would go to the supermarket and even the cash register, a person is telling you to put the mask on. And I said no. It was just a time period of like using the word no that was so hard to use before.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm not going to use it. I have asthma and I do. I had
Mhm.
at that time I had mild, now I have a little worse, but at that time I said, I'm not gonna, you have your plexiglass, you have your mask, leave me alone.
Yeah. And you have your, so normally,
Ab-
whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but it was awakened. It was definitely a period for a lot of us to really bump up the game when it comes to expressing yourself
And
and
being
having sovereignty.
aligned with your, and not just say
Yeah.
things, but like act in a way that was aligned with your values and with your truth.
Oh yeah,
It's tough.
absolutely.
Hmm.
It was hard, but it was empowering because every step I took, even though I was hesitant, I had a friend who was like, just say no, just say no. I'm
Hmm.
like, no, no, and I lost some friends. I lost,
We all
I
do.
they
Mhm.
they didn't agree with, you know, my practice was my Buddhist practice got a little, you know, um weak
Rocky.
because rocky, yeah. Because it wasn't aligned with what I felt the truth was.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to walk the talk. And
Hmm.
if I believe this is not right across the border, no matter where, if I'm at work, if I'm in my Buddhist practices, I have to say my truth,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
So I hope I didn't deviate. I know you mentioned the relationship thing, but
No, no, no. You mentioned
yeah,
that. So we have
okay.
about like 15 minutes left. So I don't know if you want to share about, you were talking about the hurricane of
Oh, boy.
2020, but also move
Well,
into that one. So I don't know how you
so
take that
oh yeah, I'll
that
give you
path.
that was yeah, that definitely wasn't the end of it. And so I decided to obviously get a house and move, have my mother with me, my sisters, our pets. 2020 happened, 2021. I was able to gather everything and move. That was wow, what a moving day.
Mm.
I felt like I had an 18 wheeler because there was my mother's stuff, my sister, mine's, and then I had my car hooked up on the back of the U-Haul. That was like, and then I had my cat in the front and my bunny.
What
My
a
cat
trip.
was like having a hysterical moment, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Here I am on I-95, which is if you live in Miami, it's bumper to bumper. And then and then I have my sister way back following me. So we had to Englewood, where I live right now. And I literally, when I was in I-75, and I'm just something that just I remember, I literally felt I was driving this low, something came out of me. That's how I can
Mhm.
feel it. Something went, and I think it said, it's too far. Go. Let me get out of here.
This is
I
too
don't know.
much.
It was an energetic something because I felt this weight literally just lift out of me. I don't know what it was. My sister felt it as well.
Mm.
Um, yeah, we moving forward. I came here, and it was obviously a truckload of stuff that we needed to unload. I get these two guys the next day, and I think they partied the night before because they were drunk.
Super.
And imagine them like wobbling with all, I'm like, oh my gosh, as long as they bring it inside, I don't care. But but they were wobbling inside with my boxes and my furniture and so forth. But that was fine. The interesting part, another thing that I remember, and I don't know if I spoke to you, I don't know if it was this is maybe a paranormal thing that if it's okay to mention it. I perceived, and I don't know if it was an entity or something, that I don't know if it was living here or, but that night, for a couple of nights, I felt the presence, and and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been a few years already, and I haven't felt anything, and now I come here, and there's something that wants to interact with me, you know. And my sister is very, as I mentioned before,
Perceptive.
she's very intuitive, and she has certain abilities. She's not yet wanting to go there, but I told her, can you, I already know what to do when certain, and I think because I was so exhausted, my energy level and my frequency was just
Mm-hmm.
very vulnerable. I knew what to do, and as a Buddhist, I chanted, and I obviously brought light to the being or whatever it was to move, forward. And my sister sensed it. I said, "Can you sense, this energy?" And she said, "Yeah, I sense a female in my room, And then I said, "Okay, I know what to do." And the next day, I said, "Can you sense her now?" And she said, "No, she's
Good.
not
Mm-hmm.
here now." So it's a very another aspect of our lives that we have that I don't obviously we don't talk or do much about it, but I wish to obviously explore because that's part of I guess a dimension or a realm that we are not yet in contact with, like on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
because we obviously have not worked enough, I guess, in order to be at that level. But it was very interesting because I haven't experienced that in a few years, and all of a sudden I get here and but I knew what to do, and moving forward, a year later, Ian, which was a Category 4-5 storm, just our year anniversary of being here, and we're just settling down. I'm planting stuff, gardening, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, what the hell's going on here? And my neighbor freaks out and he says, we never have this type of storms here. This is a place, and I'll explain briefly. There's an Indian mount close to where we live that, according to my neighbor, and I was researching, the natives that lived here knew that this area was safe from storms. Yeah. So for him to tell me that this was worrisome because for 30 some years we didn't have storms, or,
It was out of the
I,
ordinary.
it was
Mm-hmm.
out of the ordinary. Yeah. So we stayed at his house because my home is a modular home. It's kind of like a mobile, but it's actually much stronger and bigger, and it's constructed for a Category 3 hurricane. So I was, happy with that, but unfortunately my roof was old, so that was my concern. So we stayed at his house. I would never do that again. It's to be in a place where you feel like, you're going to fly with the house because the wind and the rain and the gusts, and it's, I can deal with myself, but I have my mother, she's elderly. I had my cat, our dogs, our pets, and my sisters. So you're not only thinking of yourself, you're thinking of how do I manage if, something, the roof goes off, or the rain floods and it goes into the house. So we went through it. Thank goodness our house was fine, but unfortunately there was water damage, and because of the water damage, that damaged half of the house. So we had to gut it. The process of getting insurance and getting people to fix it, it's very tedious, nerve-wracking, because you don't know. I didn't know anything about this. I have to file a claim. I have to get mitigation company. I have to get a public adjuster. I didn't know nothing of the stuff, of the procedures in order
And
to get your
obviously,
help.
they're not very cooperative since obviously they don't want
No,
to, yeah, spit
no.
money. So,
FEMA, I went to get help with FEMA, and I got zero because I had insurance. But the interesting part of it is how am I going to survive through the time that the claim is going to be filed and I get people to work in my house. So that didn't make sense. At least you should have gotten at least something, to get us through with food, because we can't work. There's no electricity. There was no water, so we're basically dealing with a lot of things.
You should have
Survival.
been in
Yeah.
at least like a camp, something, a place where you could, be provided for a little bit at least.
Yeah. It was very challenging because basically you're dealing with time, because if you have water, you have eventually mold if it's not dealt with. Fortunately, it wasn't dealt with the proper way. I couldn't get out of my house as soon as I should have, but because of my family, I just can't pick up everything and just leave and keep moving. The B&B was like ridiculously expensive to pay for a house. They didn't provide you for a couple of months. They provided you for 2 weeks. So that means I had to move and move and move. Eventually, long story short, I was able to get the RV from my neighbor, and he rented it for me for very inexpensively. So he parked it close to the back of the house so we can move temporarily there so they can start demoing half of the house and all that. Unfortunately, because there was so much saturation of work, that the people that I wanted to get were not available because they already had too many people. I wanted to get local people and I couldn't. Moving forward, I got I fired the first contractor because it wasn't kosher. He didn't do the right thing for me. Second contractor, the same. I mean, I won't get into details, but I was able to get, ironically, the money for the insurance, but I was not able to get the right people to work for us. So therefore, the budget started to get, low and low to repair some of the things that they damaged. So it was, and this was another part. These industry are driven by men. Most of them are men. So for me this is another time where I had to stand my ground and say no. Is this, I don't want you here in my house. It was at first it was very challenging because I have this, male guy telling me, no, everything's going to be fine. We're just going to do this and that. And for me to stand up and say, that's not what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do. You're not doing the right thing. Because at least I learned about the industry a little bit because of work that I used to do in Miami. So I had an idea of the basic, but to stand in, these hustlers that, and I said, I don't want you in my house anymore. You're fired pretty much, and I had to deal with the money and how much I owe them, how much, it was just really, really
super challenging.
Yeah.
Talk about resilience.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I had moments that I honestly cried because I was so frustrated. Because I mean, like, how can a human being, knowing how much we're going through, not only myself, but other people, you're dealing with the home of where they live, where they eat, where they sleep, and you're going to try to get money out of someone that's already, and not do the right thing.
Yeah.
So that happened twice, and then, long story short, I was pretty almost done with my house. I still hadn't finished, and moving forward, then we get 2 years later, which is now Helene, and Helene was just 200 miles off our shore, and we got affected by that. Thank goodness, it was a few shingles, and then we get the current one, Milton, which they scare the shit out of us because when they talk about category, Ian was 4 and it eventually technically was 5, but the insurance didn't. It was just something that went on there. They didn't want to classify as 5 because if they do, then they pay for everything.
Of course, and the deep state who is playing the harp and doing all these weather things are also the ones who have the insurance companies. So all of them work together. So everybody is never a winner in that situation.
It's convoluted. Yeah. It can be. Thank goodness, like I said, I was able to manage with the insurance company, even though it was very tedious. I was able to get a public adjuster who on your behalf does the claim and gets 10%. But then, moving forward, we're almost, I mean, not everybody got affected but there were people who did get affected, so it was like a kind of 50-50 type of thing. But then, like I said, moving forward just recently, when Milton came and it was, you know, all the spaghetti was going towards the coast of where we had Ian, it was like, this is not possible, you know. And obviously, thank goodness, well, we listened to Elena Danan, and she had a great webinar yesterday. And I'm glad she said it. I said, this was not a normal thing, you know. It
For those
wasn't.
who don't know about this, I encourage you
Yeah.
to do the research, especially about the harp
Yeah.
systems. There's about eight of them. There's
Hmm.
a big part of the deep state seems to be playing a. That's why I'm using the word, playing the harp is just a joke, but just to say that
Hmm.
they're using a lot of these weather manipulation
Modification. Yeah.
for many reasons, which we'll not get into.
Yeah.
I
I
encourage
we
people to.
absolutely. I mean, because right now, as the United States is, we're in a very delicate situation, right, with election. This is
Critical
a
time.
critical historical election, and Florida's a red state,
Of course. Mm-hmm.
and for the people, it's heartbreaking for the people that suffer from Helene. These people in North Carolina, South Carolina, they don't know of these type of storms. It's very odd that a storm of this magnitude went up there, you know, because here we prepare, we know what to do. We push shutters up, we prep, if we have to go, we have to go, which I did. This time I just said, I'm leaving. I'm not sticking around. I put the shutters up. We got some extra stuff. We packed, got into the car. It was like a road trip that took us 18 hours. We had the cat, the dog, the bunny, my mom, everybody was in the car. It was like, I
I
think
can
about
just
it
picture
now.
you guys.
Yeah, like if you're taking a picture from, looking from outside in, you'll see me driving, my sister with a chihuahua, my mother in the back with my cat. It was just like, oh my gosh, this is insane.
Mhm.
And to top it all off, I was bit by an insect. I guess I got allergic to it. My hand was like a boxing glove before I left.
God, poor
I
thing.
had to go to the ER before, and I'm very resistant to medication, but this time I had to like suck it up and take it. But it was like driving, I was driving with a hand. It was just like, I think a short book would be
Yeah.
probably proper for
Mm-hmm.
this, but not to take more of your time. I will talk about it in another video in my humble channel
Mm-hmm.
about the storms, because it's definitely, when you see it from an experiencer as living in Florida for so many years and being able to kind of manipulate and be able to get out of the way, and which we've done, but then to see it, when we were living in the East Coast, we were getting them there every so often, but
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't hear much about the West Coast. And all of a sudden I move, and then all this activity. And I know JP lives in that area.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in the West Coast of Florida, you know. And I'm like, something kooky going on here besides the election and
Yeah.
you know, underneath Florida, as many of you know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going on here. But
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
so we were able to, thank goodness, it went from a category 5 Milton to a category 3, and it came in what's today, Monday? It came in last Wednesday night, and fortunately, because it actually decreased the intensity, which Elena and I mentioned that that was going to be helpful, which it did tremendously help. We got the south side of the storm, which basically was just a lot of wind, very little rain, and it was, the where it hit was just like half hour, 45 minutes from where we live. So just those few miles make a huge difference in the impact of how the unfortunately the coastal area, there's a lot of storm surge. There were 10 to 12 feet, um, waves, which is it goes up, and that always gets affected, the
Yeah.
coastal area. So
Mm-hmm.
we can't avoid that. But just yeah, when that happened, I was nervous because obviously I have a family, but at the same time, I was frustrated and a little bit angry because I'm like, this is not right. And I think I did a little short, yeah, I did a little short video of how I felt when I got to Georgia, and it just became a little bit more empowering. I didn't want to say, okay, poor me, poor family, I didn't want to come in that with that
Victimize.
direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just said to myself, this is BS. I'm not going to fall for this.
Yeah.
They can play with us for a little bit, but I know that at the end of the day, this is all going to be in the back of our mind, and we're going to say, oh my gosh, now we understand, because it's such a broader picture of what's going on. We see people looking at the news and say, oh, it's going to hear it's so much bigger than that,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, I'm just grateful that our community was so supportive. I mean, I have to say that if having that community and having that love and compassion from everyone was so helpful, and eased my worries, because I'm not alone in this. We have so many other people going through similar situations, and I'm amazed to the resilience that we have. I'm
Really
just
the key
amazed.
word in all your experiences,
Yeah,
including this last one, is
yeah,
really this sense of resilience for sure. Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed. I'm
Yeah.
amazed how us as human beings, how much we can take,
Mm-hmm.
and and then we can go on,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And it amazes me every day to see how what we go through and what other people go through, and and just get up and start go and move forward again. So with that said, that's where I'm at. I
Mm-hmm.
I'm Yeah.
I thank you very much, Vicky, for sharing your personal experiences, but also, yeah, your transformations, your resilience through all of these events that have brought you to where you are now. A person who's, I find very wise. I know you're not going to maybe not agree, but that, I find a lot of wisdom when I exchange with you, and I find that you're never playing the victim role. You always are responsible, and probably your practice in Buddhism has something to do in your perception and perspective on life, a posture of responsibility and sovereignty, which I really appreciate. As we get close to about an hour and a half now, I'm just going to offer you the opportunity to leave us on a few words of your own wisdom, or some elements you would like to add before we part, my dear.
um I want to say, besides the resilience, I want everybody to know that you're not alone, and that even though there may be times when it feels dark and lonely, and there's always somebody else that feels like that.
Oh, yeah.
So I
Mhm.
feel that now that we're connecting in a beautiful network, that we're finally coming back together, that we realize that we never were alone. It seemed like we were alone, but we never been alone. So even um, with our benevolent beings and galactic connections,
Absolutely.
this proves me for sure that we haven't been alone. So whoever wishes to reach out and you feel the same, I am open to, you know,
Yeah.
to communicating, and hope, and if I can ease some of that discomfort for whoever is going through that, you know, we will help each other. That's what I'm trying to say. You
Yeah.
don't have to go through this alone. You can be strong, and we can say, oh, I can take it. Don't be just do it. Just reach out, because it makes a huge difference, you know. So
Thank you, Vicky. Before we go, I just want to remind everybody that Vicky has a beautiful YouTube channel. So the title of her YouTube channel is under the the image, so you can always visit beautiful Vicky's channel, which she always has really important and interesting things to bring, and interviews with people who bring really fascinating experiences, and she goes in depth into a lot of things. So I really love her channel, and I encourage you to subscribe to it. She always brings some really fascinating things there. So again, thank you, Vicky, for coming today, sharing with us some more personal experiences. We really appreciate that, and it's going to help us all in seeing things with a different perspective, and helping us as well manage and flow through our challenges in resilience, as you have so honorably done most of your life. So thank you for being who you are and what you've done.
I'm grateful for you having me here again. Thank you, my dear.
It's
Thank
a pleasure. Take immense care of yourself.
You. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.